Look at this. So probably at this point, after that nice introduction, I should just stop and say that's all I'm going to say, because I don't know that I can improve on that. But thank you, Dave. That really was very sweet. And thank you to Becky Sipe, John Feldkamp, Janine, and the rest of the Honors College students and staff for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening and for handling all the details associated with this. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on a beautiful evening, right in the middle of Major League Baseball's pennant race, to hear from a middle-aged academic. I imagine many of you might have other things you could be doing. I appreciate that you're here, and I hope that you're not here against your will. So while I hope that all of you here might find something in this room you can use, my primary intended audience tonight is students in the room, particularly but not exclusively those of you who are new to EMU and this whole college thing. And I hope that what I share with you tonight gets you thinking about what you'd like to do with this college experience over the 4 years you're here, or 5 years, or 6. Yeah, you're laughing now. And as I get further and further away from sitting where you're sitting, and closer to playing the role of the parent of a college student, I offer these remarks not just as a professor, but also as a parent, hoping you'll get as much out of your college experience as I hope my sons get in theirs. So along these lines, I'd like to dedicate my remarks this evening to the memory of Professor Jim Davis of the Political Science Department at Washington University. Jim was the first professor I met at WashU. I actually met him during freshman orientation. He remained my advisor for 4 years and my teacher in many, many classes. More than perhaps anyone else, he taught me what it means to be an academic, to dedicate yourself to an institution, its goals, and its students, and to value the opportunities afforded to those of us who get to spend our lives on a college campus. Jim passed away this spring, and I hope my remarks tonight are informed by his gentle wisdom and the many kindnesses he shared with me over the years. So, I've been asked to speak tonight on the theme of justice for all. Let me start by saying that this phrase has always struck me as more aspirational than empirical. That is, it expresses a hope of what we can be rather than a description of what we are. Justice for all remains such a lofty goal, almost such an impossible goal, that a society can be forgiven for not quite achieving it. What's far less forgivable is not striving to achieve it and not devoting our efforts and resources toward it. And without a doubt, we have so much left to achieve and so much left to do. We've definitely made progress in terms of gender equality. Now, I'm not that old, but when I graduated from college, there were 2 women in the United States Senate. 2 out of how many? You're killing me, people. 2 out of how many? 100, excellent. So for those of you who are mathematically inclined, that would be 2%, okay? Extra credit for any of my Political Science 113 students who are in the room. Email me the names of those 2 women senators by midnight, and I'll give you extra credit on the midterm. 2. When I started grad school, the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill hearings were happening. The nomination of a potential Supreme Court justice was held up by accusations that he had sexually harassed a woman named Anita Hill when she worked for him at the Department of Education and the EEOC. Now, I'm not going to get into the he said, she said. It's a lot more lurid than it sounds, and we don't need to do that. But what I will say is that the image of a group of male senators watching and participating in this hearing and just not getting it, not understanding how sexual harassment was a problem, has stayed with me and with the nation for a very long time. It awakened this concern in American politics and led to the Year of the Woman in 1992, when the number of women senators went from 2 to 7. 7% for the math folks here. And the number of women in the House went from 30 out of 435 all the way up to 48. In the year of the woman, women managed to attain barely more than 10% of House seats. But there was one very big moment, because for the first time in the history of our nation, a woman's bathroom was built right off the Senate floor. This was big. How many women senators now? Anybody want to yell out a guess? Out of 100? Nobody wants to yell out a guess? 43, go lower. 13. Go higher. 37. Go lower. Does anybody feel like we're on The Price is Right? 20. All these years later, 20% of the Senate are women. Now, issues of gender and justice are not just confined to politics. The wage gap is shrinking, but it's too big. We're getting better, but I really don't think we've resolved the challenges of enabling women to combine having both children and a career. All too often, women are blamed, sometimes through innuendo, sometimes quite overtly, when they are sexually assaulted. When judges ask rape victims why they don't just keep their knees together or sentence rapists to 6 months in jail, we have to realize that justice for all remains elusive. And in the political realm, women are still judged on superficial qualities when they're evaluated as candidates. I don't know about any of you, but I personally do not want to hear one more damned word about what Hillary Clinton is wearing, or whether she's smiling enough, or if her voice sounds too shrill. Our country is still not past the ramifications of the original sin of slavery. Too many African Americans are killed by the police, as we saw this summer, and we remember their passings with sorrow. How many people, including some very prominent and successful people, get pulled over for driving while black and then watches these confrontations escalate? Economic equality continues to afflict us all, but it hits African American communities the hardest. Does anyone believe the Flint water crisis would not have been handled differently if it were mostly white people that were affected? Over 60 years ago, the Supreme Court outlawed racial segregation in public schools. All these years later, while we've seen improvements in integration, we'd be hard-pressed to look at some of our poorest schools and say that they're equal in terms of class size, resources, funding, and student outcomes. And like you, I am numb with anger, sorrow, and disbelief over today's incident on campus, where horrific racist graffiti was spray painted on the wall of King Hall. I'm heartened by the reaction of so many in our campus community, but that we are experiencing this in 2016 wounds me to the core, as it should wound every single one of us here. It is the understatement of the day to say that we should all be far beyond this crap. We've made great strides in the area of equality and understanding for the LGBT communities. From a country whose president never publicly mentioned the word AIDS as the AIDS crisis was exploding, we've now gotten to the point where same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states. But before rejoicing, as I most certainly did, we should remind ourselves that this decision was made only by a 5-4 court vote. Ask yourselves how much trouble this decision would be in if it had been a liberal justice rather than a conservative one who passed away this past February. Consider that in many states, including this one, an individual can be fired from their job simply for being gay. Consider that at many government institutions, including universities, we try to chip away at gay rights in subtle and not so subtle ways. The arc of the moral universe does indeed bend toward justice, as Martin Luther King taught us, but I sure wish it was bending a lot more steeply and a lot more quickly. So tonight, I trust that we can all agree we live in a world with inequality and injustice. Naming this as a problem is important, but it is not nearly enough. As any scholar of public policy can teach us, our world is loaded with conditions and situations to which we acclimate ourselves. We might do this because the problem is so natural, so long-term, so normal, so accepted, that we've abandoned hope of solving it. Sometimes we adopt this position of just letting the problem be because we have no realistic thoughts on how to solve it. It's so easy, way too easy, to bury ourselves in our lives and ignore the uncomfortable realities going on outside our window. So, would it be okay with all of you if I bashed the millennials for a little bit? Oh, look, I got your heads peeking up. Excellent. I'm just going to do it for a minute, I promise, and then I'm going to make it all better. Okay, just for a minute. Give me a minute here. All right. So, millennials, you don't vote, particularly in off-year elections. You turn out at low numbers. You don't read newspapers. You don't watch TV news. You contribute to the decline of social capital in our country by not joining clubs or organizations as often as your parents and grandparents did. And shame on you all. This is the shame on you all, right? You got that? You all feel okay? Now, the response to this criticism seems very straightforward. Of course you don't sit in your chairs like old people reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. You got these cool phone things that let you get all the news you want, so you could know what's happening in politics or with the Kardashians. You may not watch TV news, but who could really blame you? When I was on vacation this summer and I was sitting down for breakfast in a hotel with my son, the TV was on in the room and we were watching the news for about 7 minutes. That was more than enough. Yuck. And don't even get me started on local news. And while you may not join organizations as much as your parents and grandparents did, it seems to me that millennials somehow manage to find community in their lives, even virtual communities, which offer many of the same benefits that scholars talk about when we talk about the decline of social capital. We'll get back to the voting thing soon. I'm not letting you off the hook completely on that one, but more on that soon. But rather than just defending millennials, let's praise them. Sounds a little bit like Caesar, doesn't it, right? I've come up, yes, I would just like you all in your head here to realize that the political scientist is up here making Julius Caesar references, and you should be impressed. Raise your hand if you're impressed. My students, I'm looking for you. Okay, I see one over there. Good, excellent. Let's praise the millennials. Russell Dalton, in his book, The Good Citizen, takes issues with many of these criticisms tossed out about your generation. Dalton suggests that citizenship is being redefined as the dutiful citizen model associated with the older generation is being replaced by a model of engaged citizenship associated with the young. The work done by this younger generation plays a critical role in getting the political system to reclassify various situations as problems. It's not an exaggeration to say millennials helped change the conversation going on within both political parties this year, particularly the Democratic Party. Whether you felt the burn or not, the Bernie Sanders movement, led as it was by so many young people, changed the nature of our conversation. Did you know that the generation of students attending college today has higher rates of volunteerism than any previous generation? The vast majority of first-year students enter EMU with significant experiences serving their communities. And then, once you arrive here, our university culture makes it clear that we expect you to continue this. The community service day we host during orientation does a great job of introducing you to serving the Ypsilanti community. The tremendous growth in the number of alternative spring break programs we have is a testament to who we are as a university and who you are as students. And I should offer a very special shout out here to Becky Sipe and the Honors College, which really consistently promotes community service in a meaningful and trailblazing way. But community service is not enough. So years ago, I was at a conference. It was a conference on teaching and learning in political science, which is not nearly as exciting as you might think. The teaching is fun. The conference is about teaching, much less so. I heard a colleague from another university tell a story about having her students do an academic service learning project at a local soup kitchen. At graduation, the father of one of the students in the class approached her and congratulated her on running such a successful program. It was great, the father said, that his son had the opportunity to work in a soup kitchen. Listen to this next part. And I quote the father here. "After all, I did it when I was in college, and it really helped shape how I see the world. I am glad my son had the opportunity to do that as well." I'm going to say that again. I did it when I was in college, and it really shaped how I see the world. I'm glad my son had the opportunity to do that as well. Stop and think for a moment. What's wrong with that statement? What's wrong there? Turn to someone next to you, talk about it for 30 seconds. I'll wait, go. Make it happen. Come on, you can do this. All right, everybody stop learning and listen to me. I see two problems here. So first of all, I feel as if the people of the soup kitchen are being kind of objectified here. They're being presented as part of the education, a prop, if you will, for the privileged, or the slightly privileged, or the privileged enough not to be dependent upon soup kitchen people. I suspect people at the soup kitchen would not particularly relish the thought that they existed to provide lessons in how to serve the less fortunate. But there's a second problem too. There's nothing wrong with working in soup kitchens. People need food, and being there to help serve them, ideally with dignity and empathy, is noble work. If you've ever done this or similar work, you know you've done a very good thing, and you can actually see the tangible difference you've made. But the bigger question is, why do we still need soup kitchens? This father worked at a soup kitchen and no doubt did some good. But a generation later, we still needed them, and we still needed volunteers like his son to work at them. Why, in a nation with so much wealth and abundance, have we not solved this food insecurity problem and eliminated the need for soup kitchens? I can't tell you how to solve this problem. I do know there are many organizations around the country and the world who are thinking about these questions. Closer to home, I want to plug the work of one of my students, Leah Dotson, who knows more about this subject than anybody I know locally. My liberal friends could probably propose nice liberal solutions involving an expanded government role. My conservative friends would certainly have ideas how to solve this problem using the market and the private sector. I feel no need to choose among those options now or to offer my own solutions, but my point is to illustrate that we can address the outward manifestations of the problem and serve soup in a soup kitchen, or we can dig deeper and try to correct the underlying conditions that give rise to the problem. We can put a Band-Aid on it temporarily, or we can try to solve it permanently. So let's assume we want to do the latter. Tonight, I stare at a room full of people who can be the change agents that the world needs. You see, all of you, like me, are blessed to be spending our time on a university campus. And outside of a Major League Baseball stadium, I am hard-pressed to imagine a potentially more important or relevant institution. And there are even some times, particularly when the Mets are not doing well, that I think the university is even more noble than the baseball stadium. Not really, but I felt I should say that. I've been privileged to spend close to 30 years either as a full-time student or as a faculty member, and have enjoyed virtually every day of it. Please disregard any of my Facebook posts about long meetings, please. And Dave, I assure you, all these posts were before you got here. So they were about your predecessors. So your meetings are great. Love them. Now, I don't want to get all theological with you, particularly here, but if there is a God, and if that God has a plan for where people should be, I'm pretty sure he or she put me in the place where I belong. I love getting to spend my life on a college campus. And what's not to love? Universities are full of people who are passionate about the work they do and eager to share that work with students. We must create a space where ideas can be shared, grappled with, and assessed against evidence. Students and faculty at Eastern work together in so many important and creative ways to push the boundaries of what we know and to attempt, as best as we can, to understand and fix the world that surrounds us. And all of you at this university are privileged, at least in one way. You are here. You have the opportunity to partake in all the wonderful aspects of university life that I just mentioned. And in truth, I envy you that fact a little bit. Because as much as I love my life today, there's a small part of me that would really enjoy going back and being an undergrad, at least before finals week. When I think back to my years as an undergrad, I'm aware of how much it took to give me that opportunity. My immigrant grandparents, with just a high school education, who sacrificed so much so my parents could get a good education and allow me to succeed in the face of relentless opportunity. I think of my parents, who stretched themselves to enable me to attend the college of my choice and supported me. I think of my teachers, who believed in me and encouraged me to pursue the path I wanted and helped me realize it was attainable. And at the risk of getting too political, I think of a government that invested in the public schools I attended, created opportunities for me to attend college through reasonable terms on student loans, and supported scientific inquiry through grant funding that enabled universities to keep the lights on. Now, I hope you can all feel proud of your own work that has made it possible for you to get here. Many of you have done far more than I had to do to get to college, and I salute you for what you've accomplished. But I also hope you can look to others who made it possible for you to get here and appreciate their efforts. I hope you can see in their sacrifices and in your own how valuable your experience is and how valuable and rich the potential is. So let's get back to justice. How do we use education to speak to justice? I'd like to offer you 3 ways. First, our education must make us smarter. We need to become smarter. Now, so none of you will be offended after that whole millennial stuff. I'll talk about myself and my own stupidity. You see, I'm a political scientist. I'm supposed to know and understand all things political. And fairly often, I do get it right. But I completely and totally missed the boat on Donald Trump. Totally. I have lots of good excuses. This was completely out of left field. We're talking about Donald Trump. How could this ever happen? Now, I'm in good company. Many, many other people missed this as well. It wasn't just me. And now I have a face-saving way to avoid embarrassment. Whenever anybody says, hey, Jeff, I thought you said Trump would be out of it by Thanksgiving, I say, yeah, I meant Thanksgiving of 2016, not 2015. But kidding aside, I was stupid, and I missed this. And I'm convinced that a large reason that I did is because I, like many of you, live in an echo chamber. I live in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. That often gets a little chuckle. I'll try it again. See if you can do better. I live in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. Whoever that was out there, I thank you very much. My friends are mostly liberals. My work life is spent on a college campus. Not exactly a hotbed of conservatism. The conservative students and friends and faculty that I do know, generally, but not always, break with their party around certain issues such as same-sex marriage. Few, if any of them, are attracted to Donald Trump in the way that some of his supporters, the alt-right, as I believe they are called, may be attracted to thinly veiled and not so thinly veiled racist, sexist, Islamophobic, and xenophobic appeals. I should know better. I know I should know better, but in a subtle way and a not so subtle way, I think my echo chamber shaded my reading of the news stories and the polls. How could Trump be on the verge of winning the Republican nomination when everyone I knew dismissed him as a joke? My own bias here made me, well, stupid. So if we do this college thing right, our experiences expose us to people who think differently than we do, and thereby make us smarter. If we're smart, if we're wise, we'll take advantage of that opportunity to talk to these people, to listen to them, to take seriously their perspectives, even as we know they're wrong. I've had wonderful moments teaching, but one of my favorites was the day that a fervently pro-life student of mine and a fervently pro-choice student of mine went out together after class to share some coffee and talk about the abortion issue. They will never agree. They will never agree on this issue. But they made themselves smarter and understood the other side better because they could listen to each other. We all live in a world where we can place ourselves in echo chambers. Do you believe Obamacare isn't working? Watch Fox News. It'll tell you it's not working. Do you believe Donald Trump routinely tells lies? MSNBC is going to back you up on that one. So whatever we do to get out of our echo chamber, the better off we'll be. And the literature tells us that a college education should help us become better consumers of information, right? William Perry's classic work on educational psychology suggests that as you go through college, you move from a perspective of believing there is a truth, a right and wrong, into a stage where you start to believe there are multiple viewpoints on every issue. Now, I like to think of this. Imagine you and a friend are debating about whether vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream is better. Could you imagine a bigger waste of time? No one can win that argument. No one can score points in that argument because we've got no basis for comparing. The richness, that stage that Perry talks about where we really want to get, is what he would call relativity. The point where we can compare across different options, thinking in our own minds, what do we value the most, what is best, what is worst here. Okay? And when we get there, it helps us to be able to articulate our views and the values and preferences that come behind them. We should always do this respectfully, with full deference to the other, to our opponent, if you will, and what he or she has to contribute to the discussion. But we have to use our education and the progression in our intellectual development associated with the college years to help us articulate what we believe and advocate for this. When we do this, we contribute to being the change we wish to see. Let me say one more thing in this context. Work by historians such as Sam Weinberg and Bob Bain suggests that the more we know, the more we use hedging language. Things like, it seems, or the data suggest, or we can tentatively conclude. Experts know that in many areas, the state of our knowledge remains uncertain or in flux. It's why Randy Bass from Georgetown University has posited that, I want you to listen to this next statement, this is brilliant. Experts' ability to speculate expertly is what makes them experts. Right? Randy is suggesting here that the more you know, the more you learn, the wiser you can be, but the more humble you ought to be. It's not a bad place to get in a college career. So in addition to getting smarter, we need to learn a second lesson. The rules of the game matter. Now, earlier on I discussed voter turnout. Young people turned out in large numbers to elect Obama in 2008. The same voters came out in 2012 and re-elected him. Obama will leave after 8 years in office with many successes and many disappointments. In part because in the midterm elections of 2010 and 2014, these young voters did not turn out. In 2010, the Democrats lost the House of Representatives. In 2014, they lost the Senate. Imagine how different an Obama administration would have been if the president had a support of Congress. Winning a presidential election is fun, glamorous, exciting. But political experts understand that winning the off-year elections can be equally as important for advancing a political agenda. Perhaps some of you are disappointed or outraged with the political nominees we have in this election cycle. These folks were nominated with rules put in place long before 2016, when the primaries and caucuses would be held, if they'd be open or closed primaries, if there should be superdelegates. Once the election year begins and the vote counting starts, it's too late to protest to change the rules. At this point, the only path to victory is to win within the established rules. Just this morning, I was telling a class that the rules of the political world were not handed down by God at Mount Sinai. No translation of the Torah that I have ever read has mentioned superdelegates. And I'm pretty sure, although not positive, that the Talmud never discusses if states should have open or closed primaries. The rules are made by those who play the game, often with an eye for how their side can win or lose based on the rules. So if you want to be effective, you have to understand how change occurs. Do the reading for your classes. Looking at you, Political Science 113. But perhaps even more than that, talk to people who play the game. Soak up their wisdom. learn from them how to make the system move. And please, get practice. Join a student group. Get involved in a cause you believe in. Work with others who believe as you do and gain this valuable experience. One day, I hope you will remember some of the stuff you have learned in your classes. But I know you will remember the work you do with others to effectuate change. So a third lesson I'd like you to learn is a very simple one. You can actually do this. There's a whole lot of stuff out there that suggests that college students doubt their ability to do what they want to do. So among this literature, Claude Steele and others discuss stereotype threat, by which they mean a tendency for people's performance to conform to negative stereotypes. For instance, psychologists have discovered that if before administering a math test, you tell women that they perform worse on the test than men do, their scores will drop. And by the way, white males are subject to stereotype threat as well. Teens typically do better on the test, and you'll see the same effect. Stereotype threat becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Along these same lines, Katie Kay and Claire Shipman's recent book, The Confidence Code, details how women suffer a confidence gap relative to men. It holds women back from seeking promotion or even from just claiming credit for the work they do. As I read their book 2 years ago, I thought constantly of many of my female students here at Eastern who are every bit as talented as the male students I work with, held back by a lack of confidence. And I made sure to share this book with as many people as I could. Ultimately, what this all probably comes down to is the well-known imposter syndrome. Dig deep beneath the surface, and all of us suffer from it. Ball players, professors, doctors, students, all of us have feelings that we're imposters, and it's just a matter of time before we're discovered to be the incompetents that we are. Now, nothing I can say tonight will eliminate that, and I'm not sure I want to. Some fear, some belief that you can prove yourself in a new situation or that you need to prove yourself can motivate our best work. But perhaps knowing that everyone experiences it might make it easier for you to work your way through it. So I've quoted some literature and I've talked here about how you ought to be confident. The best expert I want to offer you, however, is not a scholar, but a dead cat. This is a friend's cat, Wally. He should rest in peace. Nasty cat. Just nasty. When Wally's family had a toddler, they put up baby gates. And I was over at my friend's house once, and here comes Wally into the room, sees the baby gate, turns around and walks back a different way. And I said to my friend, "He's a cat. He can leap a gate." She said, "Yeah, I know he can leap a gate. You know he can leap a gate. He doesn't know he can leap the gate." If you don't know you can do the kinds of things you want, you'll just keep stopping at the gate and walking around another way. Leap the gate. You can do it. And if you can't, have a friend videotape it and put the video up on YouTube. So if we go through college, learning to become smarter, learning to use the rules of the game, and learning to become confident enough, we become privileged people, able to work in world affairs with a higher level of skill and confidence. And then comes the most important piece, which I'll introduce with a story. Earlier this year, my friend Marty Schichtman and I traveled with a group of adults to New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. This was a travel course we ran called Becoming American, the Jewish Experience. On the trip, we met with Rabbi Gil Steinlauf in Washington. Rabbi Steinlauf is the openly gay rabbi of one of our nation's largest and most visible synagogues, and an important and inspiring speaker and social activist. Rabbi Steinlauf discussed privilege, and he discussed it in the context of Jews and white privilege. Now, the question of whether Jews are white is a very complicated issue that I don't want to play much with. It's complicated. I'll just say that there's not a lot of agreement within the Jewish community on this question, and that unless you choose to look conspicuously Jewish or talk like Jackie Mason or Jerry Seinfeld, Jews can often pass as white. And what Rabbi Steinlauf told the group, think about this. He said, part of our identity is that we are privileged and empowered. You have to use your privilege to undermine that same privilege that your ancestors fought so hard to achieve. You have to use your privilege to undermine that same privilege that your ancestors fought so hard to achieve. Think about this in a Jewish context. For many years, Jews as poor immigrants struggled to adjust to this strange new world, struggled to fit in as Americans, and at least in essence to be able to pass as American, as white, if you will. But as Jews attained privilege, it became an obligation to reach out a hand to those who were struggling to climb up the ladder. Once you gain power, once anyone gains power, you must use that power to help those who need the resources. The education you're getting here at EMU makes you a privileged individual. Now, you may enjoy white privilege or you may not. You may enjoy male privilege or straight privilege or whatever. But however you identify, and whatever other privileges you can and cannot claim, you all have it within yourself to graduate from this university, and then, and even before then, you have an obligation to undermine this privilege for the benefit of others. You have an obligation to mentor others, to share your wealth and your time, should you have either, and to work to transform our world to bring about justice for all. One of our nation's great thinkers, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, reflected on some of these themes in his own life. In his 60s, he wrote a letter to his daughter Susan on her birthday. Brandeis told his daughter, "You have been happily born into an age ripe for change, and your own horror of injustice properly beckons you to take an active part in effecting it. Be not impatient of time spent in educating yourself for the task. Patience is as necessary as persistence and the undeviating aim." This sounds fearfully solemn and must not be permitted to mar the day which should be so full of joy and sunshine. But I can never think of your future without this vision of a noble, useful, and significant life. Like Justice Brandeis's daughter, you too are born into a time ripe for change. We confront a challenging and scary time for our local community, our nation, and our world. You stare into a world in which injustice abounds, and a world that someday, perhaps often, makes us question just how much we can allow ourselves to hope. Some days, like you, I fear for the future, and for the world my generation and the ones before me have left to all of you, and to my children and grandchildren. But as the rabbinic scholar Rabbi Tarfon reminds us, we're not required to complete the task of fixing the world. However, we're not permitted to step aside. Educated people who have learned to listen to others, choose wisely among courses of action, and extend their learning beyond the classroom must stand poised to start the task. There is no more valuable task that we as professors and staff at this university can perform than to give you the tools to enable you to look at the world, call out its problems, fix them, and give you the confidence you need to start. There is no more important task for you as students than to learn these lessons, internalize them, and act upon them to make justice for all a guarantee and not just a goal. When we take advantage of our education and use what we learn in college to enable us to do these things, we will all be privileged with being able to lead a noble, useful, and significant life. I pledge before all of you today to do my part. What will you do? Thank you.